This is the Starlab Deep Dive. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Starlab Deep Dive, the podcast where we ask the right questions, go deep into the specifics, and interview experts about the hottest topics in science. I am Moritz, your host, and today I'm going to be chatting with another special guest who can give us some amazing insight on what a day in the life of a lab manager looks like, especially at the moment, of course. So, working at the Leeds Beckett University, today I would like to welcome to the show Gary Lawson. Gary, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Looking forward to this conversation. I think we have some amazing stuff to discuss.
Yep, excellent.
Pleasure to have you on today. So thanks a lot for joining for a chat. For our listeners out there, to give you a little bit of context, Gary was one of the many brave souls that sent in their selfies for the World Laboratory Day artwork, where Starlab created a huge painting together with a German street artist that was made up of selfies of scientists from around the globe, all with the purpose of shining a light on the people behind the important work done in laboratories. And a lot of the others I've spoken to found it super inspiring to see so many of their distant colleagues, I guess, taking part and felt a real connection to the science community through that. Gary, how was it for you when you saw the final result?
Well, I was kind of amazed and a little bit shocked because I remember sending the selfie off and then saying it might be chosen. And then the next thing I know, there was a video of this famous German graffiti artist painting my face on a video, and it was just it was quite surreal and a little bit out of body experience. And then obviously this amazing poster arrived, and yeah, it was very strange indeed to suddenly see yourself kind of out there, and this amazing video of them painting it and delivering it to the Starlab head office. Yeah, it was very good. And then obviously everyone else on there, you start kind of looking into who they are. And
Right.
it does make you feel slightly more connected, especially at a time where you feel very disconnected from people. Oh, it was great.
Indeed. And you actually got a quite a special spot on there, didn't you? So
Yeah, I got a double spot. Everyone else had a single spot apart from two people. So yeah, I was quite pleased. Quite a prominent double space right in the middle. So yeah.
So I'm a real celebrity. I'm happy I'm speaking to one of the double spot people.
Oh yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for taking part in that, and I really hope it it brings some color to your laboratory when you hang up the poster. And I think it also makes a lot of sense to portray scientists in a new light and try to inspire others along the way. And I'm happy you had such a nice experience when seeing the video at least.
It was amazing. It was such a nice surprise.
And in the last few podcasts, we've been exploring quite a few topics related to that as well, because over the past years, science has obviously kind of gotten a bad rap in terms of a career choice. An image of long hours working alone, or hours of monotonous jobs like pipetting back and forth and so on, has led people to believe, I guess, that science really isn't a field that they want to get into, which is a real shame. And I have to quote a famous physicist here, Michio Kaku: science is sort of the engine of prosperity, and it's what really drives humanity forward. So one of the cool opportunities about this campaign was of having scientists like yourself on the podcast as well, is being able to take a look at certain jobs in particular and see how interesting the field of science can really be. So as I understand it, you're a lab manager at the Leeds Beckett University, and but also the principal learning officer. Can you give us a rundown of what it is exactly that you do?
Okay, so the first thing is I facilitate the research. So I need to make sure that the labs are running well. Mainly, they're running safely. Is that your top priority? So you've got to do the kind of biological safety, the genetic modification safety, all the background paperwork. But again, I've been in labs for that long. That kind of comes as second nature after a while. It's not something that it sounds daunting, but when you've been doing it for 20 years anyway, kind of bits and bobs of it, you kind of get used to that. After that, it's making sure people know how to run things, how to use equipment, understand what they're actually doing rather than just pressing buttons. You don't want someone who thinks they know how to run a DNA gel when actually all they're doing is pressing buttons and following a protocol. They need to understand the principles of it. And this year, more than anything, it's been different because a lot of the academic supervisors haven't been able to come into the university. So we've been keeping people down to a minimum. So we've had the PhD researchers in who do need to be in because obviously they're progressing their PhDs, and then me as the primary learning officer. So it's been a bit more, it's been quiet, but it's also been very team building. It's been really nice getting very close to the people in the lab, and yeah, it's been really nice. But again, that is mainly what I do. But again, there's also the research side of what I do. So I will be helping out the PhD students when they need it for producing images or training them on cell culture and things like that. It's a very diverse job. I mean, then there's emptying bins and really boring pipetting bits as well, obviously. That's the thing. You don't just get away with sitting in the office and filling in cosh forms. There is moving equipment, building equipment, fixing things, electrical safety testing. It's different every day. It really is.
Fascinating. Definitely doesn't sound like you get bored a
No,
lot. So that's that myth busted, I
there's
guess.
no time to get bored.
Perfect. That's the way it should be, I guess. I find it really interesting split as well between sort of hands-on work, lab work, and management of the processes and the people. Obviously, you need a lot of problem solving, I guess, as well,
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
with the current situation in mind, I guess. You already mentioned it a little bit. Can you give us a little bit more insight on how, especially your job, was maybe impacted by the pandemic? It must be quite difficult at the moment as well.
So the job I came from, I was working at Bradford University in the Institute of Cancer Therapeutics, and I was mainly in the lab running experiments with less time doing the managerial side. And as you progress in your career, like anything, you get less time kind of in the lab and more time in the office. And I applied for a job at Leeds Beckett University, pursuing that kind of as I'm getting older, start getting more into management, less in the lab. And I got this job a week before the first lockdown.
Oh wow.
So it was impacted quite a lot. I wasn't put on the sort of furlough scheme, so I was still working throughout the pandemic, but working from home. And that was kind of nice because it gave me an awful lot of time to learn the actual role, get things in place when we got back. And then a lot of it was sorting out how many people could be in the lab, one-way systems,
Right.
COVID safety, COVID regulations for the university. So that meant I could throw a lot of attention into this and get everyone back in very quickly. So we were one of the first universities to have research taken off again. But then obviously we were in the lab, but people weren't there to deliver things, or companies weren't there um, to talk to about supplying us with things. So there was a lot of shortages. Even things like gloves and face masks, which we use generally all the time, suddenly became very scarce because obviously the entire world was using them.
Right.
And then obviously we opened up, we got all the stuff, and obviously we needed to look after each other as well because there was a lot of people very worried. There was a lot less people in the lab. The university itself is empty apart from the research. It's still very, very quiet.
Right.
So it was keeping an eye on people, making sure their mental health was all right.
Important. Yeah.
And just even if you was just going for a coffee once a week with the lab and just checking everything was okay,
Yeah.
because they had their own worries as well. They had parents and people being ill. But yeah, it's been very strange, a very strange start to a job.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like it. But as I understand it, you're also doing some research projects that are directly linked to the pandemic as well, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We've just started now. We did have some proteins from old coronaviruses that we'd sent over to Italy at the start of the pandemic for helping produce vaccines. But we've just started getting some equipment in now to look at the presence of COVID-19 in wastewater. So there's a problem that obviously we know it stays on surfaces for a certain amount of time, and we know it stays in the air for a certain amount of time, and on the insides of masks for a certain amount of time, and we've kind of got that down. Obviously, that's going to change as the virus mutates, but we don't know kind of wastewater when it's being washed off hands. It's going into the sewers and things like that. So we're just getting
Right.
some COVID testing PCR systems and some wastewater testing systems. I'm going to try and put something together to look at wastewater coming out of the university, coming out of different places, to see whether there is viable virus in wastewater, which could be a worrying way that it's spreading without us realizing.
Fascinating. Sounds like some very important work.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, indeed. So I guess, I mean, those are some real world applications there, and I would love to ask you a few questions about how you got where you are today, because it's such a fascinating field, and you mentioned that you've been working in labs for a very long time. So maybe let's just jump all the way back to the beginning. Were you just really good at science at school, or what was it that inspired you to get into the field?
It was the only thing I was good at school. I wasn't much of a sportsman. My English was terrible. I was diagnosed with dyslexia quite late on, kind of 14, 15. So that explains that. And then maths was never a great thing until I got a bit of one-on-one tutoring at school, which was amazing. And then suddenly maths went straight up. I needed kind of a push, and once it clicks, maths, it clicks for some reason,
That's
doesn't it?
true. Yeah. Yeah.
Which helped the science. Um, I mean, I was good at science, but I wasn't good again with a lot of the other academic subjects. I went on to do a kind of A levels in science again. Loved physics, loved biology. Ended up choosing biology just because I enjoyed it more. At that point, physics just seemed like everything was sorted and nice and straight lines, and if you know these rules, this works. And I kind of like the vaguer biology side where everything was still is a bit of a mystery and a bit more in things still out there to be discovered and things changing constantly. Every time a new discovery is made, it can change everything. Um, and then obviously at this point, I went to do a degree in biomedical sciences just because I didn't want to get involved with the ecology side. I was more
Okay.
interested in human disease processes and the human body. Um, and then straight from there to Manchester University, where I worked with a guy called Professor Keith Gull, who was working on African sleeping sickness from trypanosomes. So his real name is trypanosomiasis. And interestingly, there's a version of it in Brazil as well. And you can
Okay.
actually go back, so that's Leishmania, but you can go back genetically to the point where Africa and South America split, is the point where those two parasites diverged, and you can actually pinpoint it directly by looking
Oh
at the
wow.
DNA as to when the DNA started diverging these two parasites to the point when Africa and South America was splitting off. Worked with him.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool. I always thought that was amazing. Incredible parasites. They can change their antigenic coat the same way viruses do to kind of elude the immune system. Worked with him for quite a lot of years, and then went to Bradford, where I worked at the Institute of Cancer Therapeutics. Again, it was just a career progression rather than being a general technician. I went up to being kind of a more senior technician with more managerial roles. Worked there for a long time. I think it was about another 8 years there. It was a great place, loved it, but again, wanted to progress the career. And Leeds Beckett is a bigger university. I had more responsibility.
Right.
So again, it was a natural progression. Each job had amazing things about it. Uh, Working at Manchester University, a world-renowned university with some incredible people, and
I
then
can imagine. Yeah.
Bradford again, we had these incredible projects connected to the university that the institute was doing with these cancer smart bombs, and again, all real-world applications. None of it was theoretical. It was all things that would actually impact real people right away with diseases and things wrong with them. So that makes the work, even when the work's hard and the work's annoying and repetitive, it does help that these things are going to help people.
Would you say that that's something that's inspired you throughout your career, even at the beginning?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Having real world applications. Um, Even when I was at college, at university, we had to do projects, and I spent 6 months working in a burns unit in Withington in Manchester. And again, that was just incredible and also quite humbling, and was looking at, again, antibiotic resistance, which was a problem even 20 years ago, especially in burns patients,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
looking at how we could diagnose what infections they had quicker, what sort of resistances were there, using maggots to eat infected flesh. Tiny live sterile maggots. They called it larval biosurgery rather than saying we're putting maggots on you.
Sounds better. Yeah.
It does. If you say to someone, oh, your wound's infected, we're going to fill it with maggots, rather than we're going to use larval biosurgery, it's a lot better. And storing skin in active manuka honey.
Okay.
So the honey keeps it sterile, and then you can basically just stick it on. It just works as a
No way.
glue and an antiseptic. You just stick it on, it sticks to the burn, and it keeps it clean, and also sticks the skin to the burn. So he's looking
That's
at things like
fascinating.
that.
Wow. Yeah. Really great. I mean, it's going to be a hard question, I guess I have for you then. I'm gonna have to make you pick a favorite. What's one of your most interesting projects you would say you've worked on?
Hopefully the one's coming up. It's quite a cop out, isn't it?
Good answer.
I'm quite excited about one. There's antibiotics from again, it's bees. Somehow bees have cropped up a lot in my career without me ever really trying. I ended up training to be a beekeeper at Bradford when I was working on cancer, so that was odd. And then I've moved to Bradford and to Leeds Beckett, and one of the projects here is looking at propolis, which is a sort of cement bees use to stick things
Okay.
together, and that seems to have incredible antibiotic properties. And it's
Oh
trying to
wow.
break down that what is actually in this propolis that causes the antibiotic effect. It kind of realised when in America they started getting rid of the propolis out of the beehives because they found it annoying because it was sticking things together. When they got the propolis out, so they could move the beehives, kind of the combs in and out, it turns out all the bees started getting terrible bacterial infections. So not only is it a sort of cement, it's also a health kind of giving antibacterial substance that the bees produce for that. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with that. So it'll be a PhD that's ongoing, but I'll be supporting that PhD.
Wow.
Apart from that, it would have to be the trypanosomes. They're incredible little horrors. They really are. Very difficult to kill, very easy to catch. It makes me sound like I'm cheering them on. I'm not. They were just as biology goes, it's quite an amazing organism. So
Right.
it's
Just
really interesting.
fascinated by them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. They've got hundreds of mini chromosomes that are able to produce all these antigenic variations, but it's not really known how they separate the mini chromosomes when the cell splits because there's only so many arms to split them across. Just a fascinating creature. So yeah, I really enjoyed working with those. And again, it was my first job. So it was when I
Really?
was,
Yeah.
so it's like I'd just left university and my first job was working with these things. So I suppose it's like your first love. My first love was the trypanosomes, and you'll love these other projects again, but never quite as much as your
Right.
first parasite.
Right. I like that. Would you say that, I mean, did you know that all of these real world applications were coming your way when you started your excursion into science as a field, or your journey into science? Or would you say that your eyes were opened once you had that, once you found your first love?
I I think I always wanted to be in the research side with real world applications because the career path I chose with the biomedical science degree is usually the one used for people going into hospital laboratories for doing
Ah, okay.
it'd be an MLSO, a medical laboratory scientific officer. So to become that, you need to have the biomedical degree. So a lot of the people on the course were doing that to go into a career of testing samples in hospitals. Nothing, I mean, it's a great job, but it wasn't for me. I like
Right.
the variation of the research environment. I like the variation in people, people from all over the world working together. The differences in the jobs, like you say, one day you're emptying biohazard bins, and the next day you go into a synchrotron to fire X-rays through a protein from tuberculosis.
Yeah.
It's just sort of massive amounts of variation in the job, and that's what I loved about it. So I think, yeah, straight away I wanted to work in research rather than in a hospital lab or in an industrial lab. I mean, there is jobs where you are just constantly doing the same thing over and over again, testing the same kits over and over again.
Right.
And I think that might just drive me a bit insane if I had to do that. I do like the variation very much.
I find it really fascinating listening to these projects and realizing that science itself is just such a broad field as well, and that there's so much left to be discovered, and that our world is sort of governed by our understanding of we have of it, and that oftentimes that starts in the lab somewhere where
Yeah,
important research is taking place.
yeah.
And one of the things we've been trying to do at Starlab as well is to inspire young people to take another look at science as a field and really see the value that it not only has as a career path, but also the value it can create for society, like all of the things you've just mentioned. And I find that really fascinating to hear your stories about that, which Sort of leads me to one of my final questions for you. If you could tell young scientists, or maybe even a younger version of yourself, one inspiring thing about your job, or give one piece of advice, do you have something that you would like to share?
One piece of advice or one inspiring quote. You could have told me that before the podcast. Let me just think. I would absolutely recommend going into scientific research for the life experience.
Okay.
You meet so many people. You learn so many things. You get to travel to places all over the world to meet these people. I mean, if not at the moment, you don't, but you will do. If you want to broaden your mind and you want to experience things, go into research, and especially biological research. If you do physics or chemistry, you will not travel as much because you've also got the option of doing field work. So when this wastewater work starts, we might actually be out going to places to collect samples. When I worked with trypanosomes, we went to Brazil to collect samples of
It's a
Leishmania.
nice trip. Yeah.
That's yeah, I know, right? It's one of those things. And even recently, going to a few years ago, managed to go to Dusseldorf to talk to some people, which is an
Okay.
incredible city that I never would have gone to. It's always
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
Berlin and different things like in Germany, but Dusseldorf, I never would have thought to go. But now I'm desperate to go back. It's an incredible place. They have parrots in the trees instead of pigeons. Little green parrots everywhere. It's an amazing place. But that's
I'm
it.
sure there's yeah.
Yeah, you
I'm sure
get
there's an interesting story about how they got there.
yeah, probably. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
some invasive thing. It's probably a nightmare for people in Dusseldorf, and I'm there saying, "Oh, it's so beautiful." They're really killing all the pigeons and native animals, but yeah, just the opportunity to travel and to learn, and you never stop learning. I'm still going on courses now to learn new
Right.
things. I'm looking at doing a MSc in lab management and research.
Okay. Wow.
So I mean, you've got all these opportunities, and you can just continually learn. You never kind of things don't get boring, things don't stagnate, and you can work anywhere in the world. It's the international language, isn't it? Science. It doesn't
I like
matter.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
you can travel happily anywhere to work.
interesting thought. Yeah, that it's the international language. I've never thought of it that way, but it's very true. It's something that every we all need as humanity.
Yeah,
So
and everyone does
definitely.
it everywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. True. So you mentioned before about sort of physics, especially as an area that is maybe you don't get to travel as much. But have you noticed over the past couple of years maybe that science is becoming a little bit more interdisciplinary compared to how it used to function?
Absolutely. You should hear the biologists complaining about the maths we have to do now. It's ridiculous. If you talk to any biologist around my age, it's like I did biology so I didn't have to do maths, and now the maths and chemistry is sneaking in so much in the
Catching up.
physics. It really is. It's right on our tail. Thankfully, so are the computers. So it's
Yeah,
kind of
that's
at the moment we're just staying one step ahead with very intelligent bioinformatics people and computer programmers saving us from our own maths because where it was before taking images, looking at these images or looking at these results, what we're doing now is churning out so much information. So the machines we've got now can do so much more. We end up with so much information. If it wasn't for people doing the bioinformatics, we wouldn't know where to start. So even now with a PhD, the first thing you do before you design an experiment is talk to the maths people and the physics people to make sure you're collecting the right information because you could spend 2 years doing something and at the end of it, you can't analyze it because you've missed something really obvious to the physics people or the maths people. So yeah, it really has caught up with everyone. Just because with the data age, isn't it? It's just there's so much information out there. We need to be able to process it. I think there's some scientist quoted that a year spent in the lab can easily save you an afternoon on the computer. Because this is how biologists feel about it.
yeah.
I'd rather spend a year in the lab than an afternoon on the computer. But yeah, I mean the physics, especially with things like atomic force microscopy and electron microscopy, um, things like that, nuclear magnetic resonance to look at protein structures. It's just yeah, you can't get away from it anymore. If you want to do well in biology, you do need to have a good grasp of maths and physics, and that's a lot of the catching up people are doing now. People of my age and older, doing a lot of reading, a lot of catching up, proteomics and things. It's so much chemistry and physics.
But I
Oh,
guess it's a lot more holistic approach to looking at the results as well, right?
oh
Which
yeah,
can, in terms of applications, mean that we're taking leaps and bounds instead of small steps, right?
So what we do is you do the massive amount of data searching first, which narrows down everything else. So instead of just kind of blindly hacking at a problem, you're going for a much more kind of clinical, scientific, scalpel edge approach to it. So you still get to do all the fun biology stuff, but you succeed more times than you fail because you've already knocked out a load of rubbish ideas with the maths and the physics and the analysis of that sort of data. So in one way, it's much better because you are targeting the research a lot better. In other ways, I think we might be missing things because an awful lot of science has been mistakes. An awful lot of the
That's
best
true. Yeah.
discoveries have been accidents, and the way we do it now is brilliant because we are getting real world applications a lot quicker. But I just wonder how many mistakes aren't being made that might open an entirely new branch of science.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way you're saying that science has sort of changed since you started. Do you see it continuing to change in the same direction, or do you have sort of a feeling about where it might go next?
There's a lot more automation, but again, that just speeds things up. It's. I think the main thing is what's going to happen in the future with science is going to be much faster. I don't think there's going to be as much fun in my terms of fun because I liked the old wet lab, making slides, doing kind of experiments on your bench. A lot of things are coming in kits, and a lot of things are already done for you. But I think it's going to be a lot less frustrating. I think things will be able to be done a lot quicker. And ultimately, to prove anything, you need to get back down to basics. So you can have all the information you want, but at some point you do need to be looking down a microscope. You need to be doing PCR tests. You need to get the absolute basics done. Uh, and people coming to science won't know all the daft stuff we used to do, all the dangerous stuff we used to do that we didn't realize was dangerous at the time. So yeah, the guys in the lab now are much happier saying, right, I'm just going to run 300 PCR tests and then go away for a week and analyze the data because they're 22, 23, and that's how they've been taught. Whereas me, that sounds terrifying. I'd rather spend 2 weeks in a microscope suite dyeing some slices of tissue, you know.
I like that thought that you said though, especially about science getting faster. I mean, we've just seen a prime example of that happening. I guess the things that have
Oh
happened
my God.
in the past year would never have been thought possible
We was
a couple of years
marveling at
ago.
this at home. We was doing a COVID lateral flow test where you do your swab, wash it in some liquid for 15 seconds and put it on a test strip and you have a result
Right.
in
Yeah.
30 minutes. And like that was developed in a year for a novel virus that is now being used across the world.
Yeah.
And it is
Crazy.
a matter of if you throw money at science, we can do pretty much anything. If enough people are invested and enough people need it, you can pretty much do anything. Even the development of the vaccine was a new sort of vaccine. An RNA vaccine was done. Obviously, let's not fall for that idea that all that research was already done. It wasn't like a brand new thing.
Yeah. Of
Yeah,
course.
all,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
RNA vaccine stuff had been done. It was just the last steps of it.
Good timing. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. But yeah, incredible the speed things can be done like that.
Very inspiring. Gary, thank you so much for taking the time today to have a chat with me.
I
It's
hope I've
been
been
really,
helpful. Yeah.
indeed, it's been really, really fascinating. Also to get a little bit more insight into the day in the life of a lab manager, but also to hear about your career path and also to have a chat about the inspiring future of science potentially. I really do hope that by chatting with scientists like you and doing these podcasts that we can shine a little bit of a light on how interesting this field can be, how broad of a field it is, and that we might be able to begin to shift perceptions away from sort of the boring image that science has often gotten in the media and things like that. So thank you for being a part of this episode, and I really hope we chat soon.
If we're talking to younger children about science, make sure they get into microbiology because it's dirty and it's smelly and it's horrible. It's really good fun. Yeah.
And yeah, with that, thank you so much to all of our listeners out there as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Also, make sure to tune in next time. If this was your first time listening to an episode of our podcast, make sure to head over to your podcast player of choice, give us a follow, a rating, or even drop us a line at Starlab International on Instagram to let us know what you thought or tell us about your inspiring science stories. Thank you for listening and see you next time on the Starlab Deep Dive.